We all want to be happy, don't we? Maybe we should all move to Finland, which has just been ranked the happiest country for 7 years in a row. So, what's so great about life in Finland? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, Scandinavian countries are regularly ranked amongst the happiest in the world. But that doesn't mean life is easy for everyone there, and mental health issues especially are still a problem. So, what are the good and bad sides of living in northernmost Europe?
Finland, the happiest place on earth, by at least one measure. The World Happiness Report looks at social support, income, health, freedom, generosity, and the absence of corruption to compile an overall score. For 7th year in a row, Finland takes first place. Scandinavian countries round out 6 spots in the top 10. Down at the bottom, Lesotho, Lebanon, and Afghanistan.
So in Finland, Denmark, and the other Scandinavian countries, you'll find that wealth is way more evenly distributed. So more people benefit from the wealth that's being generated in these countries. And then also each one supports a welfare state that provides psychological stability.
But the picture is not all rosy. Finland, especially, has one of the highest suicide rates in Europe. In 2019, it was 38th in the world. That's down 38% from the year 2000, after a lot of policy work to improve outcomes. But Denmark, for instance, is 107th on the list. Or perhaps we should take a page from Bhutan's book, which measures gross national happiness. GNH uses happiness as a metric to measure how the country's performing and was enshrined in the constitution in 2008. Back in Finland, there are more theories about why the country is so highly ranked.
There are other aspects of Finnish happiness that can be, well, maybe not replicated, but we can take inspiration from. For example, the connectedness with nature that Finnish people have that seems to be a very important component in the way they gauge their happiness.
So what can be learned from Finland's example? Or does every society have to find the unique things that make it happy?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from the Finnish capital, Helsinki, is Joel Willans. He is the author of the best-selling series of books called Very Finnish Problems. He has over 1 million followers on social media. In Derby, in the UK, is Andy Cope. He specialises in positive psychology and speaks about the science of human flourishing. He describes himself as a doctor of happiness. Frederika Roberts is a positivity and character education trainer. She joins us from Doncaster in the UK. And in Stirling in Scotland, we have Eugenio Proto. He is a professor of applied economics at the University of Glasgow. You're all very welcome to this very happy edition of Roundtable. Joel, I'll come to you first of all. I notice the Finns have a saying, the pessimist will never be disappointed. A new saying to me, but a Finnish expression apparently. They're not wrong, are they?
They're not wrong. It's a very typically Finnish expression. And it's one of the things that makes the title of being the happiest country in the world 7 years running so ironic, because if you come to Finland, you will be greeted with a lot of people who don't, on the face of it, exude happiness in the very sort of obvious ways. Pessimism is certainly something that's more appropriate to their nature, I think.
Joel, you're an Englishman living in Finland. Just give us your observations about the differences between their culture and way of life compared to, say, anywhere in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, there are countless differences. And certainly one that's most striking is, for example, the lack of small talk in general. So Finns are very comfortable in silence. And when I, for example, first met my Finnish wife, I remember going to the pub with her and her Finnish friends, and I was just astonished that people could quite comfortably sit in a pub and say absolutely nothing without really sweating and finding it just quite nerve-wracking. And this is very typical even with, for example, family get-togethers. I remember going to the first extended family get-together, which I think was a great aunt's party, and everyone just sat around drinking coffee and cake and not saying a word. And I was like, whoa, So I had to make my excuses, go to the toilet, and just get away because it's freaking me out so much. So you really see that when I come back to the UK. I mean, you're going into a supermarket and having the checkout girl or man just chatting with me about the weather for like minutes on end is a real breath of fresh air. So yeah, it's more certainly being comfortable in silence and having lots of personal space is something that's very Finnish trait.
Frederika, can we teach ourselves to be happy? I mean, what can we learn from the Finns?
I think we can definitely learn some things, and maybe that comfort with the silence is maybe, not needing to fill that silence with all sorts of stuff all the time. I mean, it's not something I'm very familiar with. I'm very talkative and Italian, and it kind of goes hand in hand. But we can learn to be happier, and there's so much research that supports that. That no matter what our circumstances are, and also the genetics of where our natural happiness levels are, which I know Eugenio has also written about, that genetic component. But there is still something we can do individually using the science of positive psychology, which is the field that I work in, just like Andy, in terms of doing those behaviors. So, for example, getting out in nature, which may be something that actually, when you look at countries like Finland, the weather does not put them off, I think, from going outside in the way that perhaps in the UK we are more put off by that. And things like connection doesn't have to be talking to people. So maybe people feel connected even in that silence and feeling very comfortable around each other. So there are a number of things there in positive psychology that we can explore further, but there are definitely lots of things that we can do as individuals deliberately to actually increase our own happiness or our sense of satisfaction with life.
Andy, you're the doctor of happiness. You strike me as a very happy-looking chap in life. Just show our viewers your T-shirt, if you would.
I got specially dressed up just for this occasion. Yes, with my happy T-shirt. Yeah, I've spent about 20 years now researching a subject called positive psychology. So my PhD, instead of looking at what's wrong with people and looking at illness, I flipped it on its head and looked at wellness. So we can all think of, everybody watching this, you can all think of a handful of people in your life who've got something a bit extra happiness, extra energy, extra positivity. In the workplace, these are your work colleagues who go the extra mile. You don't have to ask them 10 times. So it's these people who've slipped through the psychological net. Psychology's always been looking at what's wrong with people, but positive psychology is looking at who are those who we've ignored on the grounds of them not being ill. So that's what I looked at, and that's why. And I did get a PhD, so I am a doctor of it.
Andy, just tell me, is there such a thing as, is it in people's genes? Is there a happy gene that the Finns maybe have?
Depends. I don't want to go into too much of the detail of the bore your viewers with the science of it. Essentially, there is a little bit of inherited happiness. So you can look at your mum and dad. If they've been really happy, you've got a better chance. But I think it's less about that. It's more about what's going on in here, what's going on inside your head. So what I was looked at in my research was what I would call intentional strategies. I mean, without being too controversial here, we're looking at the International League Tables of Happiness. Finland are at the top, and they've been at the top for a while. The UK, we've slipped from 17th to 20th, right? And there was another research came out, I think it was Sapiens report came out, and it put the UK as 70th out of 71. We're the second most miserable country on the planet, and we're the 5th richest nation. So for me, that is about, there's something not quite right in the British culture. And I think it's less about what's going on out there and a bit more about what's going on in here. And we need to take responsibility for our own happiness and well-being rather than waiting for the government to make us happy.
Eugenio, you're an economics man. Does money make people happy?
A bit, yes, definitely a bit, yes. I just want to add something. It's true that culture matters for being happy. Also, attitude, positive attitude matters. But concerning Finland and generally speaking, all Nordic, Scandinavian and Nordic countries, in my view, a lot of is played by their environment, right? They have a good state, they very supportive one, they have good school, they have good health system. It's a society that care. Okay, it's a society that care, and they are also reasonably rich, not as rich as Americans, but they are reasonably rich. And when you take away problem of health, problem of finding a good school for your kids, decent life, good nature, and a good attitude, you can drink with a Nordic person a beer in a pub, and it's very interesting. So that's the secret of happiness.
Well, Eugenio, Nordic countries, as you say, they're all relatively rich and happy. They are usually in the top list of World Happiness annual reports. But not all rich nations are as happy as the Nordics. So Singapore is the 4th wealthiest country in the world, and they only sit at 30th in the list. Saudi Arabia, also among the world's richest countries per capita, they sit at 28th. So perhaps money doesn't make you happy, but I tell you what, Joel, lack of money certainly makes you unhappy.
That's very true. It's very true. But getting back to regarding money and happiness, I've been to Singapore. It's a great sort of city-state, but the environment and the sort of culture is so different to the Nordic countries. Where I think you could argue that Singapore is quite uber capitalist, whereas the Nordic countries historically have been a lot more social welfare states and geared towards. There's no huge gap between rich and poor. As was mentioned, there's the education system, the healthcare systems are all relatively affordable. You don't really see people on the streets. You don't see people driving around in massive stretch limos flaunting wealth. So in that sense, money is certainly, contributes to happiness. But as has been pointed out, like all these other elements about basically not having to worry so much about money, probably not having to worry so much about money are more important than actually having tons of cash in a society that's really stratified between like very rich and very poor people.
Well, there are 6 factors for happiness. All this research tells us, and we're going to take a look at them now. Trust, feeling secure and able to rely on your neighbours. Tolerance, the freedom to live according to your values within reason. Community, having a strong social connection. Healthy life expectancy is another. Financial security and freedom to choose. Which of those factors, Frederika, would you say is the most important? Because the Finns seem to have it all.
There's actually a few of those that I think feed into each other. If you look at that connection, the security, people around you, a lot of that is down to connection with other human beings. And that also comes down to when you think about that financial security. And Joel mentioned there, that disparity and whether there is actually a social security element to the country that you live in as well, and not noticing that disparity. That all feeds into that sense of we're all in this together. We are a community, we support each other, and there is a safety net. And that can be on an individual level and it can be on a societal level. And I think that makes a huge difference. And that perception of disparity or of not having those things. And when it comes then to things like that freedom to choose, that comes down to, whether it's political elections and freedom to choose at that level, or even the culture of how you choose how your working day looks, for example, and the autonomy you have in your professional life and in your personal life. That makes a huge difference as well. But I think underpinning a lot of that is that kind of aspect of where in your culture does social connection, social support, and that safety net and feeling that we are a community come into it. And that can look very different in different countries, but underlying it, it's that sense of belonging and being together rather than living in isolation and going after your own happiness and never mind anybody else.
Andy, I find it interesting that all of the countries that regularly top these charts, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, they all strike me as very well-run countries. Is that a fair assessment?
I think again, I don't want to get political about this, but I think they have a sense of public services that probably work a little bit better than what we're seeing at the moment. And in terms of what we just heard from Fred about choosing those things, I think that freedom to choice thing, freedom to choose, was a really big deal. So out of my own research, the biggest thing that will make people happy is actually the attitude they carry around with them. So it isn't an external thing, it's an internal thing. It's a conscious and deliberate choice of an attitude, crafting an attitude that works in your favor. So I think the freedom to choose is great about democracy and all that kind of on a big scale. But the choice of the attitude you carry around with you, in my PhD, I call that a portable benefit. So if you carry a great attitude, then it doesn't mean that the buses are going to run on time and the hospital waiting lists are going to go away, but it'll put you in a better place to deal with the external world as it is. Not the external world as you want it to be, because if we're sitting waiting for the world to be perfect, we were going to die waiting. So it's about what can we do individually to create a happier version of us.
It's a good point you make, Andy. My father back home in Ireland, who'll be watching this show, he has a saying, you get more with honey than you do with vinegar.
I salute your dad. Yeah, he's bang on, isn't he? And I think it's going back to the previous answer as well, was the Swedish, so not the Finns, but just across the border there, the Swedes have got a word lagom. And I love lagom because lagom doesn't really translate into English, but the closest we can get is lagom means sufficiency or enoughness. So in Sweden, you can have a lagom amount of food on your plate. You can drive a lagom-sized car. You can have your thermostat set to a lagom temperature. It's a bit Goldilocks, not too much, not too little. Whereas I think, again, I'm not UK bashing here, but I think we're striving for more than we need. Whereas I think we've already alluded to the Finnish and the Swedish is sufficiency. If we looked around at what we've already got and marvel at that, to have that attitude of gratitude first, maybe we don't need to pursue anything more. Maybe we've already got everything we need to be happy, but we've just taken our eye off it.
Eugenio, I notice as well that the Nordic and Scandinavian countries, who are always at the top of these charts, they're quite high-tax countries. But the taxation, the money seems to be well spent on public services. Is that a good observation?
Absolutely, yes. I think people are not too upset about the fact that they are taxed a lot because they see that their taxes are well spent. For example, the perception of corruption is in Finland is probably the lowest in the world or one of the lowest in the world. So there is a trust of their political class and they say, well, I pay a lot of taxes, but these taxes go sufficient. They are spent in a reasonable way, so I'm happy about that. Yeah, there is this element, yes, definitely.
Joel, talk us through nature and the role it plays in Finnish life. I mean, you've got so many beautiful rivers, national parks, 1,100 kilometres of shoreline. I mean, it's an outstandingly beautiful country and Finns seem to be out in it all the time, enjoying it, whatever the weather.
Yeah, I mean, Finland is, I think it's 75% forest. It's the most forested country in the EU, and there are it's called the land of 1,000 lakes, but there are over 188,000. It's got the world's biggest archipelago. Where I live in Helsinki, I'm, probably 5 minutes from the sea and beaches and forest. There's a huge park in the centre of Helsinki, which is just forest. So forest is really, really accessible, and Finns, it's a key part of their national psyche. And in July, if you come to Finland in July, if you come to Helsinki in July or any city, it'll be virtually empty of people because everyone has just left to go to their summer cottage in the forest. And I mean, it's such a breath of fresh air for your soul and your mental and physical well-being. When our family go to our summer cottage, we can stay there for days, weeks, start going very native, fishing, picking berries. So, and at that time, I think whenever you hang out in nature, then inevitably you come back feeling invigorated and you can take a step back from the modern world and really sort of evaluate your place in it. And it's absolutely crucial to Finnish well-being. And that's not just in the summertime. I mean, it's absolutely the case that there's a difference between winter Finns and summer Finns because winter here can be quite grim, especially when it doesn't get light until we can have literally 5 hours of daylight. So and the snow literally has only just melted about a week ago. So nature all around the year is something that's really crucial to the psyche and very much enjoyed by all Finns.
Frederika, I love nature and I love running, and I always have people saying to me, why do you get up so early? Why do you exercise in the morning? I want to show our viewers a bit of footage I made on my phone the other day in Oxfordshire while out running, watching the sunrise. How vital is it to get out there, to be in nature, to absorb it, and to have a combination of exercise and nature as a regular part of your routine?
It is really important. And it is that combination, actually. It's the fact that you're exercising, which of course releases endorphins. It helps us feel happier and it keeps us healthier. And of course, if you think about the impact of your physical health as well on your happiness, then the more you can keep your body healthy, that's going to help you be happier as well. But that nature element and that sense of, we use words like awesome and amazing a lot, but actually that sense of awe, of looking at nature, whether it's a forest, whether it's a sunrise. My daughters laugh at me all the time because I have this thing about cloud formations and beautiful colors in the sky. And they're like, how many photos can you take of this? But every time I see a beautiful sunset or sunrise or cloud formation, I have to kind of stop, take it in, and then I want to capture it in a photograph and I want to share it with others because I do feel that sense of awe. And I get that same thing actually with rainbows, which reminds me always that I hate rain. I really don't like rain, but you wouldn't get the rainbows without the rain. So again, that attitude of gratitude that, sometimes you have to have the one to get the other, and you can be grateful for that beautiful rainbow. So absolutely, that combination, if you can get that sense of awe of the beauty around you in nature and the exercise together. I'm not the biggest on exercise myself, but I work on it. And when I do, actually, I go for walks rather than running. I do really genuinely feel recharged, energized mentally as well as physically. And it's some of the research that's been done on even just 10 minutes of going for a walk or, just to kind of energize yourself, get your creativity going again, be able to problem solve better. It's phenomenal. It's so powerful.
Andy, I see you nodding in agreement.
Yeah, well, if we take it out of the Nordic countries, I was just thinking in my head, Japan have got a word, Shinrin-yoku, which literally translates as forest bathing. So this is where they go into the forest, and it's not just a walk in the woods. It's opening your senses. It's deliberately slowing down, seeing what you can see, hearing what you can hear. So it's not walking here with this glued to your face. It's actually walking in nature with your senses fully open. And I love the fact they've got a word for it, forest bathing. So get out in nature. That's probably one of the quickest and easiest ways to feel good very quickly.
Eugenio, your wife is Finnish. You're, with your name and your surname, obviously clearly a Mediterranean man. Give us your observations on Finnish society then. What have you noticed?
No, what I like of Finns is their work ethic. They're very, very serious. At the same time, they don't complain. I mean, if they have failures, they say, okay, fine. This time I failed. I'll try to do my best to avoid this. I think they have a nice attitude toward the failures. They don't cry too much out of it. They also are very tolerant. So it's a control society. And yeah, I like all this aspect of the culture, which more or less have been already emphasized by everybody, essentially, yeah.
Joel, one statistic I was quite amazed by, a population of 5.5 million people, they have 3 million saunas in Finland. Is that correct?
Apparently so, yeah. They are literally everywhere. And it's such an intricate part of, people's lives that it's almost just like, people have saunas in the houses like other people would have showers. So they are everywhere. And I've become a massive convert, actually. And the idea of communal nudity fills most people full of dread. And certainly when any of my friends or family used to come over, they'd be like, whoa. But I'm actually a big fan of communal nudity. And I think not for bizarre reasons, but just by virtue of the fact, certainly for women, I think it really could even contribute to women being happier with themselves, because when you go into a changing room and there are 100 women naked, you see that your body is not any different. That you see that the huge variety of bodies on display, and realise that your body doesn't have to be like the magazine covers that you're bombarded with all the time. So in that sense, it gives you a greater perspective on the human form. But also, it's just it's a great way of socialising. Finns probably the only time Finns actually speak to strangers is when they're naked together in the sauna. So it's it's one of those places where it can feel foreigners full of fear, but ultimately for Finns it's central to their culture and invigorating for many other, physically going in the sauna and then jumping in the lake is just amazing. Or ice swimming is is a beautiful thing that will really pump up the endorphins. So,
Frederika, they do seem to have got a lot of things right in Finland, don't they? I mean, the connection with nature, the lifestyle, not too much, not too little, just everyone just seems to be really content, is the word I'm looking for, with their lot in life.
Yeah, and I think Andy touched on that in terms of the words that different languages have as well, and that word for just enough that I can't think of right now. And it is that, and sometimes, yes, there are inequalities, and yes, there are things that need addressing in different countries and different societies, but a lot of the time it is also about that perception that we have of our situation. And if we are forever striving for more, and we're not actually appreciating what we do have and going, yeah, actually that's enough. I've got a good balance. I've got my family, my friends, my job, I've got enough food on the table. I've got nature around me, all of those things. And it comes back down to that attitude actually of being grateful and of appreciating what's there, and being able to then go from that and go, okay, yeah, I do feel content. Whereas if you're constantly striving and trying to get more, then you never actually feel like you've got that kind of sense of having enough, because you're always going for the next thing. So that is a really important factor, and that is quite cultural as well, of course, in different countries.
The clock has beaten us. We could have done another half hour of happiness with all of you. So thank you so much, guys. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.